I'm 94 years old and I've watched more than 200 people die. Not in movies, not from a distance. I was in the room, sitting a few feet away, sometimes holding their hand, sometimes just listening to them breathe. And I can tell you something most people don't expect. Only a few of them went in peace. Not the ones you'd guess. Not the ones who looked like they had everything figured out. After a while, I started noticing a pattern. I didn't believe it at first. I thought I was just tired or reading too much into things. But the same thing kept happening. My name is Maggie Collins. I live in Toledo, Ohio. I spent most of my life working as a receptionist at a public hospital. Nothing special. I checked people and answered phones, pointed families down long hallways they didn't want to walk. After I retired in my early 70s, I signed up to volunteer at a hospice center nearby. I told people I wanted to give back. That sounded nice. The truth is, I was trying to understand something that didn't make sense to me. It started the winter my mother died. She was 82, went to church every Sunday, said her prayers every night. If anyone deserved a peaceful ending, it was her. But the last 3 days didn't look peaceful at all. She kept trying to get out of bed. She didn't recognize me half the time. And over again she said the same thing, like she was stuck on it. I'm not ready. That wasn't what I expected to hear. I couldn't sleep for weeks after that, so I drove back to the hospital one afternoon and signed my name on a volunteer sheet I almost walked past. They didn't need a nurse. They didn't need a doctor. They needed someone who could sit in a chair and stay there. That part I could do. At first I thought I understood what I was seeing. I told myself the peaceful ones were the people who had strong faith, who did the right things, who lived clean lives. That made sense. It was simple. It made the world feel organized. But it didn't hold up for very long. I'd sit with someone who had done everything right, and they'd spend their last hours restless, pulling at the sheets, asking questions no one could answer. Then I'd sit with someone else's ordinary life messy. Family, nothing special, and they'd just settle. No fight, no panic. I kept thinking I was missing something. So I started paying closer attention. Not just to what happened at the end, but to what people said before that. The little things, the offhand comments, the way they reacted when the room got quiet. After each visit, I'd go home, make a cup of tea, and write a name down in a small notebook I kept in the kitchen drawer. Just the name and one word next to it. Nothing complicated. I didn't tell anyone I was doing that. It felt a little strange, like I was trying to solve something that didn't want to be solved. Some weeks, I only went in for an hour. Some weeks, I stayed longer than I planned. There were days I thought about quitting. It wasn't dramatic. I was just tired of not understanding what I was looking at. And then there was one week where 2 people in rooms, just a few doors apart, made it impossible to ignore anymore. I remember standing in the hallway holding a paper cup of bad coffee, trying to decide which room to walk into first. I chose Helen Brooks. She was 90, a retired school teacher, sang in her church choir for over 40 years. People kept telling me what a good life she had lived. You could hear it in the way they said her name, like everything about her was already settled. But when I walked in, she was gripping the side of the bed so tight, her knuckles had turned white. Her eyes were wide open, moving fast, like she was trying to find something in the room that wasn't there. "Don't let me go yet," she said, over and over, same words, same fear. Her daughter stood in the corner quiet, like she didn't know what to do with that version of her mother. I stayed for a while, held her hand, tried to calm her down, even though I didn't know how. 3 days later, I walked into another room just down the hall. Frank Delaney, he was 76, worked as a mechanic most of his life, divorced, didn't have much to say when I first met him, no long stories, no speeches. His son came in that afternoon, sat down next to him. They didn't talk much. Frank just looked at him, reached over, and held his hand. "I'm glad you came," he said. That was it. No fear, no struggle. His breathing slowed down, changed rhythm, and then it stopped. Same building, same week, same kind of room, two completely different endings. And standing there afterward, I realized something I had been trying not to admit. It wasn't about what they believed. I went home that night, opened the kitchen drawer, and flipped through that little notebook until the pages started to blur. The names were all there. Different lives, different stories. But certain patterns kept showing up whether I liked it or not. The first one was simple. People who had let go of old anger, really let it go, tended to settle easier. Not perfect people, just people who weren't still holding on to something from 20 years ago. The second was harder. The ones who had tried to fix what they broke, even if it didn't go well, didn't seem to carry as much weight at the end. I heard a lot of quiet apologies in those rooms, not dramatic, just honest. Then there were the ones who stayed busy their whole lives. Always moving, always doing something. When things got quiet, they didn't know what to do with themselves. And at the end, when there was nothing left to distract them, that silence didn't feel peaceful. But the one that stayed with me the most wasn't about what people did. It was about what they kept putting off. I'll call her later. I'll deal with that next month. I'm not ready to have that conversation. I heard versions of that my whole life. So did they. And then there they were, lying in a bed with no later left to use. That's when the fear showed up. Not because they were dying, but because time had finally stopped giving them another chance. And then there was something quieter I started to notice. Something you wouldn't catch unless you were paying attention. I closed that notebook and just sat there at the kitchen table, looking at the last name I had written down and the one word next to it. That's all it ever came down to in the end. Not their job, not their money, not even what people said about them at the funeral. Just one word: peaceful. Restless, afraid, ready. And the longer I did this, the more I understood something that took me years to accept. You don't decide that word on your last day. You build it slowly in small choices no one else sees. It's in whether you make the call you've been avoiding, whether you say the thing you've been putting off, whether you sit with yourself long enough to admit what you've been carrying. Most people think they'll deal with those things later. I've sat in enough rooms to tell you later runs out faster than you think. So don't try to fix your whole life tonight. That never works. Just pick one thing. Call someone you've been meaning to call. Say something you've been holding back. Or stop for a few minutes and be honest with yourself about what you've been avoiding. That's where it starts. If this story stayed with you, this is what this channel is about. stories about life, advice, stories about advice from grandparents, stories about life lessons.
Real things from real people that actually matter when it counts. And if you want more of that, go ahead and subscribe.